All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Kado Games. We are here, the mics are hot, and we are talking about trading card games. My friend Greg from Debatably Playable is here, and how are you doing? It's good to see you, man.
We're doing good. I just felt my microphone that's right in front of me. I feel, a little bit deceived. It is not indeed hot, but I assume that's more of a metaphorical thing. But anyways, welcome. Hello. Thank you for having me again.
Sending it through the airwaves. It'll take a moment.
Oh, wait. Oh, it's sizzling. Oh, my gosh. Ouch. It's like touching a stove. I'm never going to do that ever again.
So what you been up to since we last did a show together?
That is a very good question. I had a career switch, which is awesome. Not related to trading card games. However, I got a little bit of a title bump in the transition. So that means that more discretionary income to buy more trading cards. So bringing it back to the hobby, obviously. Got to support the industry that we love. Outside of that, I've been doing, a little bit of a rotation in the games that I play. Just trying to pick up some new games, learning Flesh and Blood for the first time. And of course, I am ever so excited for Bandai's Gundam card game coming.
Oh, yes.
Summer. So, of course, I had to do some reevaluating of, what games I want to play actively and what games I should probably, kind of put in the back seat for a little bit, just in terms of, expenditure or what have you. So that's been going on. The industry is absolutely wild right now. There's arguably 3 major releases alongside a bunch of other, not so major releases. But I think on the front runners are definitely going to be, the Gundam card game, which I just mentioned, Riftbound for League of Legends.
Yes.
And the third one, probably not as big to the West, but has been a very big success in Japan. The Hololive card game by Bushiroad.
Yeah.
Some people are big VTuber fans, some people are not. I think it will find, it'll be like a Weiss Schwartz kind of audience where there's going to be a core group of players that play it. But to me, I think those are going to be the 3 biggest releases of the year. And then everything else is just kind of window dressing on this industry we know and love.
Let's talk about that for a quick second. So this episode, we're actually going to focus on rotation, the argument for ban list for card games, rotation for card games. This is kind of the evergreen cycle of argument. Like, should there be rotation? Should there not be rotation? Should they ban cards? Should they not? Should they errata? So we'll get to that in a second. But I think this is an interesting topic because I did a recording. So by the time this comes out, it would have been 2 weeks ago. So I was talking with a friend named Rav about Riftbound, and something we talked about for a couple minutes was the fact that 2025 is an interesting monster because currently it's, April? So there's a very large amount of TCGs in the market already, just right now. And throughout the course of 2025, we're going to see a bunch of new cards hit the market. So you've got Gundam TCG, Riftbound, aka Project K. You've got Legends of Icor. You've got Bushiroad games. You've got the new MetaZoo 2.0. There's just a ton of card games coming from all kinds of different companies.
Cookie Run card game.
Yeah, on top of the already established games that are already in the market. And it's looking kind of weird because although it's good to have a lot of games in the market, it's not good to have too many games in the market because then they're just going to start falling off by the wayside. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Some people say it's a renaissance. Some people say if you ever did sports cards, it was called a junk wax era where there was just too much junk and everything was worthless because there's just too much supply and not enough demand, essentially. So do you think we're hitting a renaissance with trading card games? Do you think we're going to just have this overabundance of games and stuff's just going to start dying off because, there's too much on the market and not enough people wanting to play or pay for these games?
Yeah, right. And I think it really is hard to say. I, for one, I'm a mechanics, I'm a Melvin, right, in terms of the Mark Rosewater type of graphics, yeah. Right? I love these games. I love having a good variety. I love having games to kind of pick off the shelf, that I have 6 of the altered starter decks. Am I going to ever buy a booster pack of that game? Probably not, but I will have that to play as kind of like a battle box experience. So it is kind of heartbreaking for me to say, while I do love that from a variety standpoint, I am a little bit worried about how big the market is and how much it's willing to accept into the industry. I think from a design standpoint, we are kind of in a renaissance. If you remember, we talked about this even the first time I was on the show, I believe, but we talked about the early 2000s and, that sort of bubble where every media franchise under the sun in the wake of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon wanted to have a trading card game. The good news about 2025 is that in order for a card game to hit market, it has to be a very playable and well-tested, experience from a design standpoint. And I think that's kind of the saving grace of the 2020s so far in terms of card games. So we have that going for it. The games that are hitting market nowadays, you could say there's certain things you don't like about them from a personal preference thing, but at least they've gone through R&D and they are very playable experiences out of the box or, out of the start deck or, from a system design standpoint. That being said, though, we do have a lot of trading card games, and unfortunately, the markets overlap on a lot of them. People criticize Bandai a lot for "quote unquote" competing with themselves, right? And Bushiroad as well. Bushiroad has released, several trading card games. They have, I think they have two major concurrent games right now, in Vanguard and White Horse, and then they're doing this Hololive trading card game coming out, which will be the third. Historically, they've done. Oh, they're also publishing Shadow vs. Evolve, so this will be like their fourth release.
Yeah.
Going in current rotation.
Yeah.
And so, there's something interesting to be said about, the market they're appealing to and how much overlap there is between consumers, because, the reality of it is that there's only so much, that you can get from each consumer before, their wallet runs dry, or, they get a talking to by their significant other, to stop buying so many cards. Whatever the case may be, right? The fact of the matter is that, we have limited people, we have limited, funding and expenditures, especially, post-COVID, right? We're starting to realize the importance of having a discretionary, or not even discretionary, but like having an emergency fund right in the bank account. So I don't know. To me, it's kind of a bittersweet topic because I do see an impending, wave of cancellations, whether it be games that have been on the market for a while, whether it be these new games that are entering the market and fail to, break through that 2-year period that a lot of, collectors and players like to talk about when it comes to the lifespan or longevity of a game. But to me, I'm choosing to be optimistic. I love variety, and I'm hoping that against all odds, these companies, every single one of them, are going to be able to make a successful trading card game with their, niche community or whatever they're looking to get out of their game. I'm hoping it turns out well for them.
Okay, so let's segue with this topic. You talk about games surviving, games making it through the 2-year bubble, and living beyond usually games die within the first 2 years is the industry standard. If you can get past your first 2 years, you're in a much better place than most every other game on the market. So let's talk about the thing that can make or break a game within the first 2 years or once they get into like year 3, and that is set rotation. Yep. So this is something a lot of people have been talking about for decades. There are people who think set rotation is good for a card game. There are people who think set rotation is bad for a card game. There are card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! That don't do set rotations. They do a banned list. So every card they've ever printed can be played except the cards on the ban list. So before we get going, why don't you kind of explain your thoughts and feelings about set rotation, pros, cons. Are you for it? Are you against it? Do you think it's healthy for a game? I just want to hear kind of your input on this topic.
Right. I think first of all, I feel like a lot of the, conversation online is kind of, polarizing, where it feels like it's all, it's all black or white, where it's like, oh, set rotation is awesome and it actually is going to fix, most of the problems of this game, or no, set rotation is awful and we should not be introducing it because it devalues your collection or devalues your design space of decks. So it makes deck building less creative. But I think I just kind of want to lay out the case for both of them, and then we can kind of hash out, because I'm sure that we'll disagree at some point, Sugi, and that's always my favorite part about doing shows with you. So we can kind of hash out our differences and come to a conclusion on it. But here, I'll lay out the case and I'll steelman both sides as much as I can, because honestly, I believe in a lot of these points from both sides, and we can go into those as they come up. But I'll start with the pros first, right? So the fact of the matter is that the design team is only human, right? If they have to design with the entire card pool in mind, every single set, they're going to be exhausting their resources. They're going to make people work very long hours. They're going to make a real crunch time when it comes to the design deadlines of the set. And what rotation allows you to do is, rotate out old cards. And then when you're designing, for example, I think the big reason why rotation is on a lot of people's discussion right now is because the One Piece card game has introduced a rotation system that will start around April of next year, that will rotate out sets 1 through 4 of One Piece, which is the first year worth of releases. And you'll have set 5 onwards in the picture of the rotation. And so what this allows Banda to do is they get to take a look at, cards from, these sets that are considered more overtuned, more overpowered, and they no longer have to design around those cards, right? So take, for example, Whitebeard. Edward Newgate was a really good leader at the early days of One Piece, right?
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons why it was so good is because it betrayed a fundamental design principle of One Piece, where it's like, yes, leaders are 5,000 power. It will take you 5,000 power to clear this leader and deal damage to him. However, Whitebeard, despite having to take a damage every single turn at the end of the turn, was at 6,000. So the play pattern that would happen is that the opponent would draw a bunch of cards because the leader literally allows them to draw a card from their life at the end of every turn. And they're allowed to, easily guard against their opponent's attacks with One Piece's counter mechanic, where you can discard a card from your hand to add power to your leader, thus it not being, it doesn't get hit in battle and doesn't have to take damage, right? So let's say that, for the sake of argument, let's just say that One Piece or that Newgate Whitebeard is still a problematic card, right? By rotating that out of the format, you then no longer have to deal with a leader that has been built around 6,000 power. You can reset the base power level of all leaders back down to 5,000 power, and you can design all cards with that in mind. What problem that problematic cards in the format would lead to is that you would start designing cards either that were, going to counter that card, or start designing cards with that in mind. So it's like you can't really print a good red Whitebeard's pirate card that does like this really heinous effect because, hey, look, the leader is already really good. We don't want to unbalance our game by printing new cards, right? That's not a good thing at all. And so, I think that's honestly from a metagame health perspective, that is just the absolute, whole cake and eat it too, right? The designers get to, kind of laser focus on what kind of sets they're developing for. And then also it allows for unique experimentation, kind of in a paradoxical sense, right? So it's like, while deck builders have less of a card pool to work with, there's a lot of cards that would have otherwise been unplayable in a Eternal format, where it's like, why would you play this when all these other good leaders exist within the game, and this new leader seems completely unplayable? Well, with the card pool reducing, right, when there's less cards available, say that the game is going to size down by, I think, about a third of its card pool by the time we rotate, maybe a fourth. I haven't done the exact numbers, but let's say conservative estimate, 25 to 30% of cards are going to leave. It then allows these new leaders that would otherwise appear unplayable given the whole card pool. When you zoom in on the smaller card pool, all right, there's less cards to work with. This leader is probably going to be better than anticipated because the amount of available cards in the format is lower, and that leader is going to sift to the top of the tier list or what have you, right? So I think that's like the big thing of like pro rotation. And before I give you a whole spiel on anti-rotation, I kind of want to just get your thoughts and see what you think about kind of the pro rotation argument. And of course, there's like some other minor pros that I could talk about when it comes to pro rotation, but those are the two biggest things that stand on my mind right now.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I will say that I've been doing card games since 95, so 30 years. And before all of these current card games were out, I'm used to set rotation with Magic and Pokemon because those were like the two big ones. And I did play a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh as well. I still do. So I'm used to both the ban list and the set rotation. But I firmly believe that the set rotation is better because although I do agree it is annoying that from the get-go your cards will devalue over time. Usually a good game has a set rotation of 2 to 3 years. So if you buy a card right now in 2025, it should still be playable until 2028. And generally, depending on the game, but usually by the time you get to 2.5, 3 years into the game, those cards aren't nearly as played or as powerful because power creep is a thing, and the meta has changed.
It's funny that like rotating games still have power creep, but yeah, that may be something to get into as well.
Oh
it's like, does the rotating game need power creep? If it's rotating, why do we need to have power creep? But
it's an eternal mystery, but depending on the game. So coming from like Magic and Pokemon, you hit a threshold of like, a year and a half in, the card you were playing that was worth a lot of money, it devalues naturally because there's a better thing that's less expensive in the game, or it's the same cost in the game, but it does more stuff. And so this card you're sitting on that used to be $50 is like, oh, nobody plays it. It's not in any deck. So it's like, $20 for collectability. And then if set rotation hits, it's like, you probably offload it anyways, but if you still kept the card, you're trying to sell it, maybe it drops to like $12, $15, maybe $10. So like the card's not worthless. If there's other formats, sometimes the card stays the same value. So I'm thinking of Magic where Magic's kind of a terrible example because there's so many like formats that if a card rotates out of standard, it can still be played in like modern, vintage, legacy, commander, and some cards get their value from other formats, not standard. So let's not use Magic as an example. Let's use Pokemon as an example because Pokemon basically a standard and then expanded, and then the Gym Leader Challenge. Well, no, there are some cards that GLC pushes a lot higher than they should be when they cycle out. So, anyways, I think the point I'm trying to make here is most games that are established that have gotten past the 2-year mark, once the set rotation happens, your cards don't have the same value. And so you've if you're a player, you've kind of already moved on. If you're a collector, you're definitely collecting the newer stuff. So the only time it really hurts your wallet is if you're a business person who's trying to buy these low and sell them high, and then set rotation hits, and these cards are going to devalue really quickly, so you're trying to liquidate. So I think One Piece is an interesting conversation because you're about to hit the point that multiple other successful card games have had. Like they've already gone past that, 10, 20, 30 years ago. So like Magic doesn't care about set rotation. Pokemon doesn't care about set rotation. But newer games like, people are asking like, will Disney Lorcana have set rotation? One Piece has already announced set rotation. Gundam, what will Gundam do? Like so this is probably a great point to specifically zone in on like One Piece, since that's what's coming, because I do think looking at set rotation from like the big three, they don't care. So it literally doesn't matter. But One Piece matters because your set one cards, they're going to tank as soon as that rotation hits.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important as well in this discussion is that, a savvy businessman would not be buying cards that are going to rotate out a month before they rotate, right? Correct. So I think that the biggest, hit was what just happened, right? Hello, I am Bandai. We are announcing that you are going to get rotated in a year from now. Have fun, backpack vendors, or even local game stores for that matter, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I noticed the market, I think, across the board has dipped a little bit, not to the numbers of panic selling or buying or whatever it is, right? Which I think is good. However, I think the liquidity of a lot of cards from sets 1 to 4, liquidity meaning for those listening, the ability of how fast you're able to move one of your assets into cash, so your asset being a card in this case, right? Yes, that has dropped significantly. No one is wanting to buy high-end cards from One Piece sets 1 to 4 right now, unless it's just really in a playable deck and people think they can get a good gear out of the card playing it, right? And so honestly, that's the biggest hit, and we've made it over that hurdle, right? Where the initial knee jerk reaction is gone. People have been able to let it marinate with their thoughts or whatever metaphor you want to use it. And I think most people have accepted. They may not like it, they may not agree with it, right? But the people that are playing One Piece and like playing One Piece and have every desire to continue playing One Piece, they're going to stay the course and they're going to have a fun time with it.
I would say this is a good time for collectors because the cards that are going to become not worth less, but their value is going to drop. They can acquire the cards that they want for their collection because they're not players. They just like the cool art, the cool foiling. And so this is a good time for collectors to go, oh, hey, that card I want is $100. People are trying to liquidate it for, 60 to 80. So I can get it for, 30, 40% off. That's a great deal. If they're willing to wait longer, it could go down. The other thing that could happen is there could be a fan format or an official announcement from Bandai that there will be like a legacy format where you can play everything, kind of like, expanded or modern.
Thankfully, we do have that announcement. So there's not a whole lot of information. All we know is that there's going to be a tournament at regional events, even as big as regionals. And I imagine this would trickle down to even local game store play as well. And they say, hey, there's going to be a format with alternative deck building regulations. I think it was implied, or if not implied, officially stated that it will be an eternal format for One Piece that is, supported at these events. Now, given that standard is going to be Bandai's main focus and what they're designing around, will the eternal One Piece format take a hit in terms of, intended interactions and player base and price or whatever? Yeah, probably. But the good news is that they're not leaving old cards out in the lurch. They're at least going to try initially to cultivate a fan following for an eternal format, which to me I think is the kind of a happy medium between both outcomes. I think just kind of biting the bullet, even though it's not going to make you any money as the company creating the game. Bushiroad has notoriously had problems with this with their Cardfight Vanguard premium format, where like Bushiroad's not making any money from supporting premium, but they're still doing it just because they know that removing it would just be like the biggest, middle finger to the fans, right?
Tell us what the premium format is so we can understand the difference in that standard.
The premium format is basically, legacy or an eternal format for Cardfight Vanguard. So Cardfight Vanguard, has had a bumpy road. It has had to reboot its game twice. So even more drastic than a rotation is a complete rotation where it's like this whole entire game that we built up this point with its own unique mechanics and whatever. We're still going to make Vanguard. It will just come with, a different rule set. And it's not like too drastic or anything. It's still Vanguard, but like, they're going to change some things up, change how power scaling works. They're going to change some mechanics around, things like that. And all of it's just like, when they creep a format in terms of power way too much, they kind of have to hit the reset button. Otherwise, people lose interest in the game. And so, it's gone through a couple desperate times when it's like, we just have to push the reset button on the entire game. And they had to do that twice. So that was a pretty big blow to that game's reputation. I'll put it that much. I'll say that much. Yeah, no, that's the biggest thing. Like, I am proud of the fact that Bandai, alongside Bushiroad, is just kind of biting the bullet and swallowing their own pride and going, yes, we understand you as the loyal fans have stuck with us throughout, most of the set releases of the game. You've been around for a long time. To be able to, I guess, placate the audience would be the cynical way of looking at it, right? They're going to give us an eternal format where we can play all of our old cards, right? And honestly, again, kind of the best of both worlds that they're able to do it. I think if they just did the pure Pokemon way, where I know expanded is like real question mark, but is it really real? The Pokemon way
is really the big one, honestly.
Right. The biggest way that I look at it is that, if your cards rotate in Pokemon, they're rotated, like there's not really a whole bunch of places to park your collection outside of just looking at it. So
there's really not. And that's why I say Pokemon isn't a great example because like standard is cheap. Like the top standard decks have been like sub $100. So you could play the best deck in the world for less than $100. There are cards in Pokemon that are worth more than an entire competitive deck. So like Pokemon competitive play is hyper approachable, and we're talking about singles. So like a lot of people buy, booster boxes and booster packs. If you're a tournament competitor and you just want to play tournaments, you can buy your deck on TCG Player in a given format for, $80, $90. So you don't have to buy any product. You don't have to buy any sealed anything. You just pick up those cards and go. And that is insanely approachable. So all the people who are cracking packs realistically are collectors and flippers, because players are not paying those insanely inflated prices for Pokemon product. Magic is a little bit higher. So decks are still in that, $200, $300, $400 range. So if you have like the appropriate mana base, or you pulled cards from an earlier set that are like the skeleton of a certain archetype, then you could buy the singles you need to populate the new deck. But if you're buying booster boxes, they're still valuable product. So like Magic's probably a little bit of buying some booster boxes and then filling in the gaps with single cards. Yu-Gi-Oh's kind of the same way, but booster boxes are pretty cheap. You can get a box for like $50, $60 MSRP. So, you buy one or two boxes. If you don't get the hits, then you just pony up for the singles. But booster boxes have secret rares in them, so you could trade or sell those to then pay for what you need. So, like, Yu-Gi-Oh's pretty open-ended with, you want to buy singles or sealed. Either way works functionally. But then, like, Lorcana, you think about that and you could talk about One Piece because that's in your wheelhouse. So with Lorcana right now, some of these high-end decks, you've got these, legendary rare Tamatoas that you need 4 of, and they're, still running at $50, $60 per card. And it's really not viable to buy booster boxes because you probably won't hit them. And you probably won't get 2 in a box. You could, but the odds are not in your favor. So if you're a competitive player and you're playing the high-end expensive decks, you're probably going to have to pay for those singles. So, you're not really incentivized to buy sealed product. So yeah, each game kind of has what's the realm for One Piece? Is it better to buy singles? Is it better to buy sealed, or maybe like a mix of both? Like, what are you into right now?
Yeah, I've historically always done singles for One Piece, mainly just because product is notoriously hard to find, and if you do find it, there's not going to be a retailer that's willing to, sell it to you, at an opportunistic loss, basically, where it's like, oh, they could have sold it for a bit higher, right? So, I mean, unless you're well connected to distributors and people that can get it to you for, a fair markup over distribution costs, then, I think singles has always been the way to go for One Piece. But yeah, interesting discussion on kind of the price ranges and what to expect. Rotation also, has the kind of unintended side effect of also, decreasing the cost of the game. You don't have to buy very expensive staples that are from very old sets. You can kind of just focus on the, kind of designer / developer intended archetypes, or, even, I guess, unintended archetypes, that happen to be within the set. So to me, it's like a lower buy-in, but also like, less tangible, quote unquote, investment stuff. One thing I see, a lot, and one thing, if you are willing to, move on, unless you have anything else to say, Sugi. We spent, a lot of this recording so far kind of hyping up rotation, talking about all of its pros, but I really do think, this is a nuanced discussion, and there really are real tangible downsides to rotation that I kind of want to kind of take the floor with. But
yep,
do you want to say anything more on positives real quick? Or
I do want to say, so I am in camp positive rotation for one big reason. This is something that's hurt my soul for many years. I've seen a lot of games do neither rotation nor banning. They just keep developing and designing around what's already been established and growing. And the games have all died. They get to a threshold where there's too many cards. The buy-in point is too crazy. Because there's no set rotation, there's cards that are still being played from the very first set all the way through.
Have to reprint cards when they have to they can't acknowledge that they're looking at the secondary market, but they have to quote unquote acknowledge it by reprinting cards that are too expensive. It becomes messy. Yeah, I agree with you. It becomes messy.
And my favorite game of all time was Netrunner. I loved that game, and I was really, really insanely good at that game.
Wizards of the Coast Runner.
Well, no. So the Wizards of the Coast Netrunner just died because it didn't have much traction, but Fantasy Flight Games picked it up.
Right.
And they had some great stuff in that game. But there were now this is tricky in this conversation because there's two problems. One, it was what's called a living card game. So if you don't know what that means, there is no booster pack, there's no rarity. The format, it's the whole format's dead. But the idea when it came out in the early 2000s was we're going to operate this card game style kind of like a World of Warcraft subscription. So every month you'd have like a $12, $15 expansion, and there would be cards in that set. And if I buy a pack and Greg buys a pack, we would get the exact same cards. So there's no trading, there's no rarity. The cards are technically worth the same amount regardless of where you are. So up front, this idea was really nice because there were no booster boxes, there were no booster sets. Once a year, there would be a starting 2-player game that would have exclusive cards. So you'd buy one of those. They were $40, not very expensive. And then every month there was a $15 set. So over the course of the year, you're spending what, 150, 180 total. And the expansionary sets gave you a full play set of every card you needed. Okay, sounds good on paper. Sounds really, really nice. Here was the problem. After like 3 or 4 years, there was no set rotation, and they stopped printing cards from, sets 1, 2, and 3. So if someone wants to get into the game, if they want to start playing Netrunner, there were actually, legitimately, there were cards being played from the very first box set because they were that good. That box set had been out of print for 2 or 3 years. So you either had to pay marked up prices on the secondary market, or you had to find a reprint set, but all those were sold out, or you had to buy those cards off of someone else's collection, or there were people selling the cards on like TCG Player and eBay. So the only way to buy in was to pay an exorbitant amount of money. So we weren't getting new people.
How ironic is it that the no booster pack model of trading card games still suffered from the same secondary market forces that
it was ironic. It was
right. Like wasn't like it's like you swore the thing that you became the thing you swore to destroy. Fantasy Flight.
Looking at Voldemort. Right. So it was, the irony is not lost on me. But the other problem was the game was so bloated that people were just quitting because in current metagames, you have like a rock, paper, scissors, Spock, which is healthy. You want 3 to 5 decks. They have good matchups, they have bad matchups. Well, in Netrunner, there were just like an infinite amount of good matchups because there were so many good cards from so many sets, and people were begging Fantasy Flight to do a rotation because there was just too many good cards. I think they did a couple of erratas and like one ban because there was one card that was just broken. It was too good. But for the most part, it was pretty much everything is like fair game. So the problem was Fantasy Flight goes, yes, we will do a rotation. We will rotate stuff out. We'll have a new core set. We'll have a reprint. We'll bring some stuff back that's been out of market. We know that they didn't acknowledge a secondary market, but essentially they acknowledged, we know that these cards need to be in the game, but you can't get them or you have to pay it way more than they're worth. And then they killed the game because everyone was really happy, really excited. It's like set rotation is going to save the game. We're going to have a smaller pool of cards. There will actually be like a legitimate metagame versus everything is good and all the decks are playable. And, you can go to a tournament with 100 players and you could legitimately see, 50 good decks. So there's no way to tech against what you're going to play against because there's just too much diversity. Like too much of one thing is a bad thing.
About the downside of a paradoxically wide format.
Say what?
I think the biggest thing is like, you could say that, this format is wide. It's really good, because it's, diverse and things like that. But yeah, again, if there's like too many meta factors to prepare for within a particular format, then yeah, it just kind of feels like you're playing a roulette table, where it's like who you pair against, like what deck your opponent is playing. I actually have this criticism for Lorcana as well, because like the game is really low variance, because the mulligan's really strong and things like that. And it feels like, the most important part about the game is actually what deck your opponent is playing and not the skill level or the deck building prowess of any particular participant in the game,
It can matter, but right now there's a lot of mirror matches because it's just one color plus X that's dominant. It's right. Sapphire X. That's it. It's blue.
Yep. Play blue.
But yeah, so my thing is, I've seen a lot of card games say, "Hey, we're not going to do set rotation. All your cards are valuable," and the pool gets too big, the pool gets too bloated, your cards become oddly devalued because there is no rotation, and then the game just dies because like you just don't have any way to account for what's going to happen. Like a healthy meta is like 5 to 6 decks, I think, with maybe like an outlier rogue deck that can counter something, but there's a legitimate enough leeway where you can have, it's going to be A, B, C, D, E, maybe G.
Right.
Once you
I think there's also there's playable 3-deck formats and things like that. So yeah, sure. 5 to 6 I think is like the magical Christmas land. Like, this is awesome. They nailed it,
Yeah, I know when people say like, "Oh, hey, there's like 10, 15 different decks that are viable." I mean, casually, that's probably good, but tournament really level, I don't know if that's a healthy thing for tournaments because there's just too much variance. But the point I'm trying to make is I've seen card games get eviscerated, and people hate the game because there's no good way to buy in, because there's no set rotation. Your cards are all valuable, which means none of them are valuable. And it, like, seeing a community beg FFG for set rotation is one of the funniest things, because people right now in different communities are like, I love set rotation, I hate set rotation. And I love going back to looking at that time where the entire community was begging. They're like, Fantasy Flight, please save this game, put a set rotation in. And it just never happened because the game died right before it was about. Like, I think they canceled the game a month or two before the set rotation was about to happen, and it was the saddest.
Do you think the developers were planning it and then they just got the rug pulled, or like?
Yes.
What do you?
Yes,
speculatory. What do you think happened?
So there's a lot of rumors. I don't know what the truth is, but if I had to guess, the biggest rumor that's been substantiated that I've heard is Wizards pulled the license from FFG because Wizards owns the rights to Netrunner, and FFG didn't buy it from them. They essentially rented it from them.
Okay.
So the rumor, the strongest rumor on the internet is FFG lost the license either through Wizards wanting it back or Wizards wanting more money, or there's a lot of potential things that could cause that. But the most generalized consensus is FFG couldn't negotiate and or lost the license to Netrunner, and they had to can it because they showed pictures of the product. So like the product definitely existed. It was produced, and I'm assuming it was somewhere on a boat somewhere that they were just like, destroy. We can't do anything with this. It's like, no. Because it wasn't like, a year out. It was like, hey, this is coming out next month. Hey, the game's canceled. That stuff's in a warehouse somewhere. It's not just, lollygagging on, someone's desk computer going, oh, hey, print this at some point. Oh, never mind. Canceled.
Yeah. A set rotation probably would have fixed a lot of Netrunner's problems. But here we go, Sugi.
Yeah.
It's my time to shine. I've talked about the positive of set rotation the entire time. However, I think there's 2 probably pretty substantial, maybe even 3. I'd say 3 substantial problems with set rotation. So first of all, I just want to preface this whole entire thing and say that, yeah, I am pretty pro set rotation, because at the end of the day, what I care about, a couple things, right? I care about metagame health. I care about, letting the designers, kind of be their best selves, right? Realizing their full potential or whatever, kind of corny thing. You want to, like, I sound like a high school algebra tutor right now, right? Unlocking your full potential or whatever.
You go to algebra. Of all of the classes you could have said, you go to math, like
algebra,
okay.
Yeah. I did algebra in middle school. I hated it, but
okay. I feel like this would be like in a drama class, like be your best self. All right.
Your best self. Anyways, yeah,
like a dance class, yeah.
Right. I like giving the designers freedom to design. Probably not even like the best mechanics, but like interesting mechanics that a lot of people want to buy into the set. They don't really have that leeway if the format is eternal and people are just going to care about what upgrades their best deck, right?
Sure.
And also, rotation helps push product sales, right? I love this industry. Yeah. I want what's best for, kind of the product side as well. I care about what makes a good product. I care about what makes a good card game more importantly than any other factor, right? And I think that rotation promotes those two things more than not having rotation. However, there are some real problems to it. The first one, I'm going to appeal to the people that just really love their archetype, right? I can even say it firsthand, right? I'm a big Katakuri fan. I like the Big Mom Pirates. I like Whole Cake Island. I love everything aesthetically. I love how the cards look. I love how the deck plays. The deck is very variance focused, so it feels like I'm playing a game of Duel Masters in One Piece. It's awesome. I love the archetype. However, those cards mostly are prominently featured from sets 3 and 4. Who would have guessed, right? Most prominently set 3. And so, I'm kind of having to live with the real repercussions of the fact that, one of my favorite, not even one of my absolute favorite card game archetype in One Piece, and probably within my top 5, top 10 archetypes in card games of all time, is no longer going to be playable in the main supported format from Bandai, right? And that's not to say like, that might bring back Yellow Big Mom Pirates, in a future set, or, they've even talked about, this is kind of a sloppy way of doing things, but they talked about like, we're going to have this list of cards that we're going to allow into the format, that we're going to grandfather into the format. Maybe Yellow Big Mom Pirates cards are going to be part of that. Yeah, it's really weird. You would think that they would just reprint the cards, right? And that would be the telltale sign that like you're good to, play them again. But apparently they're going to do this weird like list thing, which feels like kind of, slapdash. But so that's the biggest thing.
No, bad.
If people love their archetypes, and especially in a card game like One Piece, people are really invested in this franchise. People really love their characters, right? And it kind of sucks that in a anime-based card game such as One Piece, you have to deal with that problem of, hey, your cards are going to rotate out of the format and you can't play them in official tournaments, right? And that is not really seen in most other anime-based, IP-based card games on the market, right? So it's like, you take a look at White Schwartz, no rotation, you pick your set, you play it, you roll with it, right? Union Arena, same thing. Digimon and Dragon Ball somehow, despite being older, have managed to escape, the grasp of rotation, right? One Piece has been around for
power creep. They just power creep it out.
It's interesting too, because my biggest theory is that the design space of One Piece is smaller, so that means theoretically there's only so much they could do before they inevitably had to rotate, right?
Yeah.
The design space of Dragon Ball and Digimon are bigger, thus, allows them to, tweak with the card design and tweak with the mechanics of the game to allow the format to live for a lot longer without having to do the inevitable rotation. And two, I also think Bandai is confident that they can be able to pull off the rotation thing because One Piece is as big as it is, right? I think they're being a little bit more sure. The product sales are awesome for One Piece, right? So they're going to be like, we might have a little slap on the wrist for doing rotation, but things will pick back up and we'll be doing just as fine as we were. Plus we get to, we care about the health of the game, things like that, right? So that's the one thing. The second thing is that, I've heard some people, talk about it and like do counterpoints to this, but the fact of the matter is that your One Piece cards are worth money. Right. And as a natural, effect of rotation, kind of much like, when they banned, Jeweled Lotus and Dockside Extortionist and Mana Crypt in Commander, right? They kind of just quote unquote destroyed, $250 to $300 worth of people's collections overnight. No one wants to buy them anymore. No one will, pay you a premium for these cards.
That's not true. I like buying them.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, not no one. A lot less people will. Plus the card prices went down a lot, right?
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that those cards are going to go back up. So it's like, oh hey, $40 Jeweled Lotus, take my money.
Right, and it's also like I hear some people bring a counterpoint to this and being like, well, card games aren't investments. You should be in a Roth IRA if you want to invest. It's like, yeah. There's multiple ways to,
that was pretty good. That was pretty. Was that your algebra teacher?
No, that's that's my best impression of Twitter people on the internet, straw manning everyone in existence, right? But no matter how you want to look at it, right? If you want to look at it as a hobby, that this is an expense and you're it's a discretionary expense to, kind of support your lifestyle and your hobby. Sure, you can look at it that way. I would like to argue it from the perspective, hey, these are physical items. They are tangible. They are assets. They have real value, right? And so, unfortunately, what happens with a rotation, right now we haven't seen too much of the impact of that outside of like a 10, 15% drop in liquidity. When rotation finally hits, hey, look, your collection just lost 30% of value overnight because of the rotation hit, right? And the unfortunate part of it is that, in 2025, you kind of have to go into trading card games, unless you're buying like reserve list Magic or something like that. You have to go into it with the perspective of, hey, these cards will shift in price for any reason, whether it be ban list, whether it be rotation. And you kind of just have to make peace with the fact that, kind of like in regular investing, right? Don't spend money that you can afford to lose. Don't put money into card games thinking that you're going to get a return on investment or you're going to be able to break even if you sell them in the future, right?
No.
Go into buying in this. I kind of turn this into a PSA as well. Go into buying card games with the expectation that you are spending this money and there's a high probability that you will not see it back. And
no, you're never getting back.
And you might, you know what I mean? Like there might be some good buys. You might be able to make some good deals. You might be a wheel and deal and, probably break even on your collection when you eventually sell it or, maybe even make a little bit of money, right? I sure have put that into practice to try to afford the hobby over the years. But, I think there are some people that, are wishing that to be different. Honestly, myself included, I spent a lot of money in trading card games. I would love to get a better return for when I finally sell things I no longer need. But yeah, you just kind of have to go into the expectation that this is an expense for your hobby. I think one last thing I want to talk about are all the, the deck builders in the room. The people that love brewing with a large card pool. One piece players are going to hurt a little bit from this, or just any game that has a rotation, because suddenly you are getting told what sets that you are allowed to and to not play. And because the set size is smaller, the designers are more aware of what's in the format. They can develop more cards, so unintended interactions do not exist. And I feel like unintended interactions are kind of a flip side of the two sides of the same coin. You know what I mean? Because in Magic, I'd say that most combo decks are unintended interactions by design, where it's like, oh yeah, we didn't think that these two cards could work together this way. But yeah, it makes for some really interesting gameplay, some really interesting play patterns, things like that. And sometimes unintended interactions can be completely broken. It's just the developers going and designers going like, oopsies, we forgot about this common from 17 years ago. We forgot that Shuko actually works well with his bird, or something like that.
Bobby.
Right. And like there's unintended interactions that happen as a part of that. And so like, I think the real mad scientists that like to brew and, cook up some decks, and they may not even be great, but they're just like, they like having kind of the world being their oyster. Obviously, you're not going to get that much of it out of rotation. You'll probably get some of it. You'll probably get some of that itch, right? You'll be able to scratch some of that itch, but definitely not all of it. But yeah, I mean, that being said, in conclusion, right, like I am pro rotation. I don't think the negatives outweigh the pros of rotation. Because again, what I care about first and foremost, metagame health, product health, that those two things are being very well serviced with a rotational system within the game. But yeah, there are some real negative side effects. And I think, I feel like more of the discussion should kind of be, nuanced and talking about the pros and cons, because obviously there's no perfect one size fits all solution. Unless like the designers and developers, if these companies are able to like hire like 200-person teams that like are running neural networks all day and like, I don't know, like doing some completely crazy work on design and development that like allows them to like have an eternal format that never gets broken, that never has the need for ban lists or whatever. But like, I have yet to see a single trading card game do that. And I'm not going to be one for counting that the 2020s is the time for that to start,
No,
yeah. It's theoretically possible. Is it realistically possible? Probably not. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say on the rotation topic. I'm pro rotation though, overall.
So I have some thoughts on what you said. I think you made some great points. I don't agree or disagree with you. So I'll say my piece on this. So when I went into trading card games, my family, so my dad was into baseball cards. I had an uncle who was like dad had a pretty decent baseball collection. My uncle had a lot of comics. Like to put it in perspective, like still has Superman 1. He has like Spider-Man 1. Like he's a huge collector. So and I also had friends who were playing and stuff like that. So right up front, they told me if you're going to the Pokemon was my thing. So they told me, hey, if you're doing this, do it for the fun of the game. Don't look at this as an investment. Don't look at this as a money opportunity. My uncle just happened to buy the right comics at the right time, so it was pretty much luck. He didn't know. My dad was collecting cards because he loved them, and then that exploded, and he's sitting on rookie Wilt Chamberlain, rookie Magic Johnson, so many names you would know. And my dad just collected it because he liked it, and they just so happened to become explosively valuable. Ironically, Pokemon, now looking back, it's like, oh, all those cards I had. I had a first edition base set Shadowless Charizard. But as a kid, I didn't know any better. Anyways,
Right,
so
right.
the point I'm making
That's
is
the less you think about that, the better it's going to end up for you.
Oh
Sugi.
man, I had a complete binder of first edition base set, so I'm like, oh god. So I know my perspective is very interesting because I have touched some of these cards that people are chasing right now. I've owned them. If I can, I think they're still somewhere in my parents' garage. I really do. I need to find them. That's my ultimate goal in life, is to find that binder. Anyways, the point I'm making is I was told up front from other people who had hobbies that became very valuable, just do this for the fun of it. If it becomes valuable, great. If not, great. Just do it because you like it. And if you don't like it, do something else. So I played Pokemon and traded Pokemon and bought Pokemon because I liked Pokemon. I was a part of that Pokemon craze. I was the demographic for Pokemania. I had the video games. I watched the anime. I was in middle school, so we were playing, Pokemon on the, the school recess floors on the ground, or playing it on the tables. We're just goofing off as kids. So I think what people should do going into any hobby is have a really honest discussion with themselves about what they want out of the hobby and what their expectations are. So if you're a player, have fun playing. If you're a collector, have fun collecting. If you're doing it for money, that's fine. I run a business with card games. That's exactly what I enjoy doing. But don't lie to yourself. I think a lot of people, like you said, people say, oh, this is not an investment. Don't treat it like an investment. You should do, stocks and bonds in a Roth IRA. I see what they're saying, and I do agree. You get better payout with, using an actual, like stocks and bonds, trading, marketing, investment system. Trading cards can be an investment. Trading cards can make a lot of money. There's a lot of things trading cards can do, but if that's not what you're doing trading cards for, I don't think you need to worry about it. And if that's something that matters to you, then you should worry about it. If you're getting into a trading card, like, say you're getting into One Piece and you're worried about, expected value of product and the value of a card and the liquidity and all these, stats of a card. Sure, that's fine. I enjoy that. But I also know when rotation hits, okay, it's time to move on. Like, I'm moving into the cards that are going to stay in rotation. And if I can get a card that's rotating out really low, I'll ponder it. Like, I'm not going to say no. I know that the card will lose value, but also I get to think about, like, do I want this for my collection? Do I have someone who wants it? Can I sell this card? Is this card something that might get reprinted? So I buy it now, it gets reprinted later, and then goes back up in price. So there's a lot of things to speculate on. So I'm not saying this is or isn't an investment. What I am saying is I think if people in general have an honest conversation about what they want, what to expect, then whether a set rotates or not, whether a card goes up or down in value, they know what's going on in their personal soul, so to speak. And so if a card goes down in value and that bothers them, they can sell it or just not play that deck. Because I went into Pokemon knowing, these cards may or may not go up in value. That's fine. I don't care. I may or may not be playing this game past the first year. I don't know. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it is. So I do agree. It does stink knowing that the value of your cards is going down. However you want to deal with that is your own prerogative. But I think people in general need to understand that trading cards in general are going to degrade in value, just like cars going off the lot. It is extremely, and I mean extremely rare for cards in general to increase in value.
I feel like there's always that allure, though. And I think that's what attracts a lot of collectors, right? It's like the idea that, oh, yeah, if you buy, honestly, I feel like a lot of the card game companies love the fact that people think this way, right? But it's the idea that, oh, yeah, if I buy our Scarlet Violet Journey together right now, then that Iono full art card, if I put it in my closet for 12 years, will become really, really expensive. And all of my money that I spend right now is going to suddenly become worth it, right?
I think that comes from our experience. We know better than that.
Right. But that's also the thing. I mean, it does happen for sure. Trust me. And also one thing that's also, awesome is being able to play these card games is just those incidental moments to where like you bought a card and you didn't really buy it for investment. It's just part of your collection. And then it triples in price. And you're like, oh my gosh, I own one of those. Right. And then it's not like you're really that intent on keeping it. It's just that you had it as part of your collection. Again, incidentally speaking. And you're like, okay, let me go ahead and sell this. Right. And then like you had like a profit margin of like $140 on it. You're like, oh my gosh, I just, it feels like I won like a scratch off ticket, just by having cards in my collection. And so like, those feelings are really awesome, but very important. It's important to emphasize that no, like that was never something that we treated as an explicit investment. That was just, hey, your trade is $15 off. Let me go ahead and trade for this card, that's worth $15. And suddenly it spikes for some weird reason. Right.
Yeah. I will say,
so I think that's the best way to engage with the hobby. Of course, if you're looking for investment, have a full-time job, do some traditional investing. If you want to diversify and you want to do some alternative, that's what I consider trading cards, by the way. I consider it like an alternative investment, right?
Yeah.
If you want to do some of that, again, not financial advice, right? But you can make it a small part of your portfolio, just have some fun with it. And part of the reason why I love, trading card reselling as a hobby is that I don't really care about the money as much as I do about it feels like, when I am able to like arbitrage a card for more money domestically than I bought it for, imported or whatever. I feel like it's like a little game that you have to figure out with each item, right? It's like, oh, well, this card, this card I can get for this much money off of, because I like import a lot from Europe and resell it domestically. That's like my main business model. And so to me, it's always really fun being like, oh, I can make, after fees, I can make like an $8 margin. Is it worth, the opportunity cost of, spending my money and having the lead time of getting it shipped to me now? And then when you finally do sell it and you realize that you made money off the purchase, to me, it's like, oh yeah, this level is complete, right? It's like playing a puzzle game and you like completed the level in a puzzle game where you finished out like how to make the money. I know this sounds like, I'm sure that I'm probably losing some people in the audience right now. It's, something that's definitely, it appeals to particular types of thinkers and people that, enjoy particular reward, I guess, pathways, right? If you want to put it that way in terms of like, your psychology. But, I care about that more than the money. I care about, feeling like you're, using the system to your benefit. And, I won't lie, the benefit is nice. That $8 profit times, 30 cards if I do a bulk buy, right, turns into a lot of money that I can then use to buy the cards that I actually want to play, right? And so, this hobby is expensive. Let's be real, right? I don't think there's anyone who's ever arguing in good faith, outside of very particular cases like, Pokemon Standard or something like that this hobby is cheap and that, even people that have very low incomes are allowed to enjoy it because unfortunately, this hobby is going to price out a lot of people. But if you're able to find an avenue to be able to pay for your hobby more effectively as like a supplemental source of income or something like that, that's awesome. More power to everyone who wants to do that. And, of course, I wish everyone the best that wants to. But I mean, I think Sugi and I are also being real in the sense that, if you want to do that, you have to be very tactful, very, you don't have to be very emotional, you know what I mean? Like, you have to acquire cards and be able to want to sell them, you know, they can't be cards that you're attached to keeping around. And then also it has to be something that, you know, has a clear profit margin pathway to where, you know, you're buying at 60%, selling at 85%, like that's a 25% margin on the card. And even then that might be too low, right? Depending on the item. But yeah, you know, if you want to do that, more power to you. But also, you know, that has to be very methodical, and you kind of have to treat it like a job with how much focus and energy you put into it.
Oh, yeah, that's no joke. So, I like doing card sales because, funny enough, I enjoy the thrill of going through bulk. So, to me, I see a box of bulk, and to me, it's a treasure trove.
Right.
Like there could be nothing in there.
One
I might have
man's
bought
trash is another man's treasure.
Yeah, I might have bought this box for $50 and there's not $50 inside. Usually that's not the case. Usually you can at least break even, but it's just fun because I'll throw on some music, I'll throw on a movie and just start sorting through cards. And I can't tell you how many times, you know, people are like, I don't know what's in here. I just want a number. It's like, cool, I'll take the risk. And you know, you hit a $300 card. It's like, oh my God. So for me, like the high of hitting that really cool card is what drives me because yeah, it's risky, but I try and mitigate my risk by saying, hey, you know, you want $200 for this. You don't know what's in it. I don't know what's in it. Cut me some slack. You know, maybe give me like 125 and I'll buy you a beer. You know, like I'll try and appeal to the person because like I could be throwing away hundreds of dollars, which I really don't want to do. So, you know, let's negotiate. And I'm very good at negotiating. So, you know, I don't want to cheat the person, but I want it to be a little bit more fair than, oh, I just want this arbitrary number that I pulled out of a hat. Like, come on. And if we don't come to agreement, that's fine. I'll walk away and go somewhere else.
It's also funny because a lot of those lots are like, hey, I have this collection. I've done zero research. I put in zero effort. I just know there's probably around 2,000 cards. And I want $200 for it. You know what I mean? It's this seems to be completely ham-fisted the way that you're doing this. You know what I mean? It's like, I haven't put in any effort. I do not care what's in it. You know what I mean? I want it to be gone tomorrow, and yet I want, you know, a number that's pretty high. And so, of course,
and
you know,
sometimes
it's
people
work with those people.
Yeah, and sometimes you can negotiate with them, and sometimes you can't. And you know, so be it. I'm not mad if someone says no. There's an infinite number of bulk lots to buy in the entire world, so it's not a big deal. But the point I'm making is my thrill isn't to me. It is a game. I see it the exact same way you do. My game is different, so I don't care about the profit. I know I'll make the profit. That is not the issue. I can flip a profit. My game is here's 10,000 cards. Find the needle in the haystack. Okay. And the faster I find the needle in the haystack, the faster I can flip those cards, make more money, find a new haystack, search through that, and continue this journey of finding cool treasures in other people's cards. And I do speculate into cards. Not many. I have, like, full disclosure, I have investments, I have stocks, I have bonds, I have IRA, blah, 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 blah. I have all that stuff. But there's cards that I'm looking at. So something I learned, I do sports cards as well. Something I look at are, you know, maybe cards designed. So not to be too, you know, sad or doom or gloom or gross, but like people are going to die. That's just a fact. So something I learned in sports cards is, you know, it's not a bad idea to pick up cards of pretty well-known athletes before they die, because at some point, you know, not to be a doom and gloom, but like Shaquille O'Neal will pass away one way or another. And I don't mean to be rude, but like if you think about Kobe Bryant when he passed away, I think the market value on all of his cards went up like 80% instantly.
Oh, yeah.
Just because he was dead.
It's really weird how the way the market, well, I guess it's expected, but you know, it's interesting the way how the market reacts to even sad news, right? Regarding a person. Right?
Yeah. So it's not that I want these people to die, but it's like, hey, you know, Kobe Bryant, he passed away. Shaquille O'Neal's getting older. You know, Dennis Rodman, Michael Jordan, like there's a lot of people who are older and I'm younger than they are. So the moment they die, Michael Jordan cards are going to like triple in value. So I'm taking a risk. I'm speculating on people who are still alive, who are very popular. And I'm willing to bet their cards will go up in value. However, I've been warned very drastically by multiple people. If any of these players do something stupid, they abuse a person, they assault a person, they commit a crime, they, O.J. Simpson themselves, the value of those cards will drop indefinitely. So it is risky because at some point it could come out that, Shaquille O'Neal murder someone and now no one wants to collect his card and all those cards I speculated into are worthless. So yeah, it's a risk, but I'm not spending thousands of dollars. I'm just having fun and, slowly, progressively picking up cards. However, those same people had a really funny antidote or what's the word I'm looking for? That they had a great point of Charizard will never commit a crime. Charizard will never hurt someone. Charizard will never do anything illegal.
I think you're looking for anecdote.
Anecdote. Yeah. That's a great, So they had a good point of collecting Charizards. Charizard is safe. Charizard can commit no crimes. Charizard can do no wrong. Maybe
I don't
Pokemon
know, man.
Company.
I don't know if you've heard about Typhlosion, but yeah, we won't get into that.
Oh Lord. Here we go. So in terms of
I mean, I agree with you though. For the most part, Pokemon cards, are not going to, be affected that way.
Yeah. Now, on the inverse side of that, so the people who were explaining this to me were sports cards experts, and I'm the trading card expert. So my argument is with sports cards, they don't reprint a 1985 rookie Barry Bonds card. I'm just pulling stuff out of my hat. I don't know what year he was. I don't know any of that stuff. But I'm just saying, you're not going to be in 2025 and they reprint a card from the 1990s, the 1980s. Trading cards can reprint anything at any time for any reason. So that is where speculating in trading cards gets risky because although it hasn't happened yet, it doesn't mean there won't be some new reprint set, some new anniversary set, some new promo set, some new something where that card that you have once was worth thousands of dollars, got reprinted, and now it's worth not thousands of dollars. So nothing is safe in trading cards. I've learned that the hard way because I've seen it happen multiple times where I'm sitting on a card I speculate in and the company goes, oh, hey, cool. We're going to do a really awesome reprint set. And that card is in it. And well, it's great for people to get the card, but it's terrible for speculators and resellers because now this card is worth, nothing. It's not, I lost money. Okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. So anyways, I think the point I'm trying to make here is if you do what you do because you enjoy it, I think a lot of these fears and things that Greg brought up aren't nearly as damning, so to speak. If you're going in purely on I want to make money and I want to get the most value, then you have to go in knowing there's a lot of risk. There just is risk of reprints. There's a risk of just devaluing because of rotation. There's risk of banning. There's risk all over the place. So do what you got to do, but have fun with your hobby. I think that's the most important thing. Have fun with your hobby. And
this is something that you're electing to do outside of your core work hours. You know what I mean? You better be having fun. And that's not me trying to be unfun saying that, you know what I mean? But if you're, if you're spending your limited time on, fun things or just free time you don't like, then maybe it's best to reconsider.
Yeah, I think the best way to put it is just roll the punches. That's what I was taught. That's what I was trained to do. That's what everyone I've ever talked to who's been in the hobby as long as me or longer than me says. Just, hey, rotation is going to happen. Bans are going to happen. Reprints are going to happen. You just roll with the punches. If you speculate into a card and it doesn't happen, no big deal. What's that old adage? Don't buy what you can't afford. Don't speculate into cards if you don't have the money for it. Don't overextend your financial range. Yeah. Don't spend money you can't afford to lose. I think that's an incredibly wise piece of advice. So if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I can't afford this, I would highly advise don't continue doing it. That's probably not a safe idea. But if you can afford to lose the money, or you're doing this for the fun of it, or you don't you're like me, I don't care. If things rotate out and my cards devalue, so be it. My collection is my collection because I love it. On the business side, I'm not going to buy things that I know are going to devalue. I'm going to buy low. I'm going to sell high. I'm not going to sit on cards that are worthless. Like right now we're about to hit a Pokemon rotation and, you know, people are trying to offload cards that are, you know, dropping in value. It's like, I'm not buying them. Businesses have to make profit and you have to be smart about how you run your business. But like there's a brand new set of Pokemon, like Journey Together just came out. I'm fine buying those cards. They don't rotate for another 2 years. I'm not going to sit on those cards for 2 years. I'm going to buy them buy them low, sell them high. So
Zacian seems so fun as a deck, by the way. Completely unrelated.
Yeah.
I want to play Pokemon just so I can play Zacian. Oh my gosh, that deck is so cool.
Yeah, Zacian's really fun. So like I always speculate into trainer cards that I think are going to be popular, trainer cards that are going to be staples. Yeah. And you know, you can find a bunch of trainers that come out in a set for like 1 to 5 cents. And like I speculated into Arvin when he first came out for people who are Pokemon trainer or Pokemon TCG fans. So I think I bought like 30 Arvins at a penny, 2 pennies a pop. And then at his peak, I think he hit like $3 or $4. That's when I sold them and I made a ton of money. And I have no Arvins now and he's rotating out. And that's fine. It doesn't affect me. But I knew going in, I'm going to buy low, sell high. And then because rotation's been around in Pokemon for years, I know when a card's going to rotate out. It's about 2 years. So if we're close to that rotation.
Scarlet Violet rotating out, by the way? Or are we keeping it?
Half.
Oh, interesting.
So we're losing E and G. So I think it's going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I think it's H and forward is the rotation. I'll have to look. It's either A, B, C, D, E, F. E and F are dropping.
Is me Rhydon done for? That was Scarlet Violet base. I'm interested.
Yeah, that's gone. So A, B, C, D, E, F. So it's I think it's G forward. It's either G forward or H forward because I have E and F cards in my collection, and people are trying to sell them. It's like I love these cards because they're cool. I'm never selling these. I don't care if they're worth millions of dollars. Well, maybe millions. If they're thousands of dollars, like I'm not going to sell them. I like them too much.
I feel like I'd sell anything for $1 million. $1
million, we can talk business. But I've got cards from Scarlet Violet, and I didn't buy them to sell them. I bought them because they're going in a top loader, and they're going in my binder forever because they're cool. Also, they're like full art alternate rares that are like rainbow or gold. Anyways, they're not really losing their value because they're hyper collectible. So anyways, I agree with you on that. It does suck. But if you're willing to have the conversation with yourself of what's your expectation, I think this isn't as bad of a pill to swallow as some people make it out to be. And then the other thing you talked about where a deck archetype cycles out. So I have played Yu-Gi-Oh! Since it came out. I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of the most fun casual games ever made. I don't love competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! As much as Pokemon or Magic. I like the complexity. My biggest thing is, as a Japanese person, I love anime. Oh, shocking. And I love the art and anime styles of Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. Like, they have the ultimate themed deck. They just lean heavily into
Yu-Gi-Oh! Art is awesome. I love it.
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is some of the coolest art, but I love this is a Magic term. I love tribal decks that are like focused around a single theme, a single character, a single focused thought. So if you think about Pokemon, you have a bunch of different Pokemon, you have different types of Pokemon, you have different searchers. So there's not super thematic. It's just what's most efficient, what's most functional in this deck. Magic follows, color grades of like, here's a single color deck, here's a dual color deck. But you're really playing it's kind of like a best of format where you're just playing the best cards in those colors. It's not necessarily themed to like, there's certain sets where you have like, pirates or zombies or magicians or wizards or, whatever. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always, since the very beginning, been all about theme. And that's something that I love. So it's like, your Dark Magician deck, your Blue Eyes White Dragon deck, your insert name here. So with Yu-Gi-Oh! They have a banned list. So they don't use rotation. But basically what happens is a deck comes out. It's really, really good. It's really, really fun. If it's too powerful, Konami will let it live for like 2-3 months, and then they ban it, or they ban the critical parts of the skeleton combo, which essentially kills the deck. And now all those cards you had are worthless. That deck is worthless, and you are quite literally sitting on a pile of garbage. So other than like your spells and traps, which are pretty universal that you can slot into any card, any deck, the themed cards are gone. So for example, I'm thinking of like Elemental Dragons. This is like 2007, no, 2011 It's 2011, 2012. So there's a deck called Elemental Dragons where these dragons could search themselves, they could banish themselves, they could special summon themselves. They each had special abilities. You could then synchro summon, you could XYZ summon, you could do all these combos. It was a toolbox deck. One of my favorite decks of all time. It's super fun because you could literally do anything you wanted in any capacity you wanted. The only limit was the pilot and their skill point. Well, eventually, it was so dominant that Konami banned the dragons. They banned a bunch of the tools they had, and the deck was gone. And so I didn't spend this much money, but the deck was worth about 2.5K. And so conveniently, I was lucky enough to trade, and I was able to wheel and deal and get cards on the cheap. But I felt really bad for my friends who did pay $2,500, and now all that money they spent, I think they could sell their stuff for 800. It was pretty bad. It was really, really bad. So it felt bad. It wasn't a pleasant experience. But as a Yu-Gi-Oh player, you kind of know that going in. Konami doesn't let overpowered decks live for very long. So if your deck is overperforming, and your deck is just constantly winning tournaments, and your deck is out of control, they shut that down. So I feel exactly what you're talking about with One Piece, where that's one of my favorite decks of all time. It's probably my top 3 of all time. And, I was playing at tournaments, I was playing at YCSs, I was winning all kinds of stuff because it was that powerful and it was that good. And then we kind of saw the writing on the wall, and, one day of the week, we got the Forbidden Limited list dropped, and boom, all of the dragons are banned, and the deck is dead. And there it is. Like that's it. Like there's nothing else you can do. So
yeah, and you really like that deck, and like you wish it would exist in some capacity.
Yeah. So I understand the feeling.
Like it's just one of the worst feelings, It
is. But I sold what I could. I bought the next deck and I moved on. And I mean, ironically, I've enjoyed some of the most unfair decks in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! And they were really unfair. They're terrible. So for people who want to, it's like Shadal Player, I did Necroz, I did E-Drag, I did Spellbooks. I've done quite a few of the really oppressive decks. And they've all had a moment where Konami bans something that breaks the skeletal system of the deck. And Spellbooks was the only one that was able to evolve and bring in a different combo line to keep the deck alive. But yeah, E-Drags died instantly, Shadal's died, Necroz died. They never came back. They're never ever coming back again for any reason whatsoever. And for Konami specifically, it's one of those things where it is what it is. If you're a Konami player and you play Yu-Gi-Oh, this will happen. It's just a part of the monster. If you don't know any better and you get caught by that does suck a lot. But I feel like most people who are going to drop that kind of money on those decks know they're getting into a deck that is very limited lifespan. It's going to win almost everything you touch. You're going to go crazy at events and locals, and then you're going to have to sell out underneath before it gets banned, or just accept that you play it until it gets banned and then you buy the next thing. So again, I think rolling with the punches, it's kind of just the best way to go with trading card games, because they're going to stop the deck that's what kind of crushes people, depending on which game you're talking about, or it's going to get power crept out. And so at some point, regardless of what the format is or isn't, the deck you're playing right now is not going to be the same deck you're playing next year. It just won't be.
Right. Yeah, I mean, things like I think one thing as well about pro rotation is just naturally, due to power creep, cards are going to be quote unquote rotating anyway, where they won't literally rotate in the format, but they rotate in the sense of power level that, there's no reason to play them. There's no reason to buy them. So, and it becomes like a philosophical question where it's like, what's the difference between a rotated card that's technically banned from competitive play versus a card that no one plays, no one will ever play, and is legal for competitive play? And the answer is most likely, there's no difference, right? Just one of them is literally, unplayable, and one of them is just functionally unplayable, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that all being said,
I have empathy for what you said. You brought up great points. Like if your deck gets cycled out or banned, that is not pleasant. If you bought a deck and you spent, $300 or $400, and then set rotation happens or a ban list happens and your deck is no longer worth what you paid, that doesn't feel good either.
I'll let you in on something, Sugi. My Katakuri deck is close to $2,000, so we can try working on that number.
You got to be careful.
Yeah.
Believe
I can
me,
play it. I can play it in Eternal format. I'm still keeping the deck. I love it so much. I don't think I'm ever getting rid of it. But for me, that's the one silver lining. I'll get to try to play it in Eternal, and that will be my outlet for that deck, right?
Yeah, so I've been on a big Twilight Zone binge. So to quote Rod Serling, for your approval, submitted for your approval, I truly believe in my heart that the majority of people who are in the trading card game ecosystem, who've been there long enough, probably if I had to guesstimate, like more than 6 to 9 months, they understand because at that point you've seen like 2 or 3 sets released. You understand the concept of whether you like it or not, whether you like rotation or not, whether you agree with it or not, whether your game has it or not. The game will naturally rotate the cards that are played, period. There will be either power creep, there will be the new hotness, there will be something that makes it so the cards you bought in January of 2025 are not the cards you're playing in November of 2025. It's just going to happen. So whether you're pro rotation, against rotation, I think it's just going to happen because that's how card games work. Because if there's no reason to buy a new product, the game will die. So card game companies have to create a reason to buy a new product, which usually comes in the form of power creep. So, like, Pokemon's a great example. There's set rotation happening where there's a bunch of cards that are cycling out. Most of the cards that started in Scarlet and Violet haven't been played for a year. Maybe some trainers, but, like, the Pokemon themselves, there's been way better Pokemon in the newer sets that are just completely outclassing the Pokemon that came in the Scarlet and Violet, like, base set. So, whether you agree with me or not, whether you like it or not, those cards have just naturally been rotated out due to the power creep of Pokemon itself. So, if you don't like, if fundamentally you just hate the idea of there's going to be a power creep, there's going to be a rotation, the cards I buy right now I can't play in the future, and the cards I buy right now will not retain their value on average, I would submit this may not be the right hobby for you because that just kind of happens regardless of anything else. I can't think of very many games where those things specifically are intact. Usually it just kind of it's just a natural process of the trading card game business, I guess is a good way to put it.
I do have one last pro rotation argument for you before I think we're probably about good to head on out of here coming up soon. I'm looking getting a little bit sleepy, but
oh yeah, it's late for you. Yeah, let's get on out of here.
Oh yeah. Sorry not to push it. We were on a roll with a great discussion, but all good things must come to an end. One thing I think as well that's very important is, like, let's suppose I think Yu-Gi-Oh is a great example for anyone who's familiar with that game, where modern Yu-Gi-Oh feels completely unidentifiable to classic Yu-Gi-Oh. Set 2 cards, play 1 monster, pass sort of Yu-Gi-Oh, right?
Oh, the T set, love it.
With rotation, you can try to, and hence why I say try, because I don't think they always do it successfully, especially not in Pokemon. You can try to avoid designing around power creep, where it's like, okay, here's the standard of power that a card game, or that the card will be designed. These cards will rotate out, and so, when rotation happens, you can design cards around the same power level, and yet there's still incentive to buy the product because, those are the cards that are playable in the format. And so one thing I think they're also doing with One Piece is that they don't want One Piece to be unidentifiable. They want play patterns like, play a 1-mana 2K on turn 2, attach 3 down, swing 5/5 to be, like, in the game, right?
That's disgusting, by the way.
That's just one of them, right? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty strong, but it's also, I think, fair, right? Because you're not, you're giving up your opportunity to play a 3-cost thing on turn 2.
Right.
They want very simple math-based One Piece to be on the forefront of everyone's minds. That's what the game was designed with the intention of. they don't want the game to turn into combo hell or like, combo centric win lines where like, you summon,
ABC
like,
win game.
You summon like 3 to 4 characters off of a Gecko Moria on turn 4 with your 8 Dawn or whatever, and that's the new game, right? It's about like who's able to assemble this cool unintended interaction by design, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing is that a game with rotation can actually keep its core identity without losing out on other things because, hey, we can, again, design this game around a standard of design that will allow the game's best gameplay elements to shine through regardless of how many cards are legal, right? And I think, honestly, I might be cooking here. I might be crazy, right? I think that answer might be more important than like literally any of the other ones that we've talked about in this podcast so far. I would love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, yeah. So it's interesting because each game has a different identity. So Pokemon, I think, is interesting because, not to like be hilarious, but I think Pokemon is about evolution. So the core there isn't really right. So like the core identity of One Piece, like you said, is very much like follow a play pattern. You have certain like thresholds you hit, certain mathematical trajectories, and that's what One Piece wants to be. Pokemon is, in my opinion, Pokemon is constantly trying to innovate with, new ways to interact, new combos to build, different ways to find consistency, different ways to make Pokemon interesting to play. So they're never really following a specified pattern other than how the game is played. I think Magic might be a little bit closer to what you're saying with One Piece, where Magic might have new cards, but the color identities stay pretty true. So like green is ramp and stompy, and blue is control, and red is fast and aggro. So you get to pick how you want to splash those colors and those color identities together. So as rotation hits, the type of card cycles out, but the identity of the color does not change, similar to One Piece. Yu-Gi-Oh is just crazy. Yu-Gi-Oh's, I don't know what they do. I feel like they roll dice and randomly, I don't know. Konami is a very strange company in my opinion.
But it is one of those reasons why like Rush Duel is popular in Japan, because people love quote unquote old Yu-Gi-Oh. It's also one of the reasons why like the Duel Masters mobile game had such an incredible launch, because they kind of like reset the game from zero almost, where like they ported over like original Duel Masters cards, and that was the mobile game. Because people, regardless whether or not, they're correct in their, opinion or not, right? People love calling back or hearkening back to the old days and being able to experience what they thought they loved so much back then, right? And so for a game to evolve so much to the point of being unrecognizable by Yu-Gi-Oh, some people are like, can I have that old experience back, please? Right? Yeah. And that's something that rotation's able to facilitate really well. I don't know if we've seen it too much. Maybe we'll see it, kind of an industry first for One Piece, where it's like, otherwise this game would have devolved into a broken card design mess. But honestly, I love to see it. I think One Piece is in for a really bright future.
I do agree. I can't think of many card games where rotation was bad. Obviously, Kaijudo comes to mind, but
I think honestly
there were some other problems that were worse than rotate. I don't think
rotation may have been on the path of helping the game out. Again, kind of like you said with Fantasy Flight, I think the popular fan theory was that Hasbro pulled the plug from Wizards that was passionate about developing the game, and unfortunately, the design team didn't really have much to say about it. Again, it's the speculation.
Yeah.
And that's how that happened. But it's kind of like rotation was implemented, and then 3 sets later, the game, was canceled. And so, a lot of people think like
it was worse. It never implemented. It was right before it implemented, like literally a month before rotation was about to take effect.
Oh, really? I thought. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I might have to take a look. I thought it was with the release of Quest for the Gauntlet. I thought that's when the rotation happened, but it may have been later down
so
the line.
for Netrunner, they were going to implement rotation. They were going to release a new core set, and they were going to reprint a bunch of cards that were getting rotated out that would be healthy in the new rotation. And
you're talking about Netrunner. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's right. I was thinking about Kaijudo. Yeah, so Kaijudo did have like a little bit of rotation. And then like 2 sets later, the game died. And obviously, if they planned for the game to get canceled, that decision was probably made, long after the decision to implement rotation. So yeah,
Right.
The game had some other problems, I think. I don't think it was rotation that killed it necessarily. For Kajiro's sake.
Yeah, I think there were some other problems under the hood that were a lot worse than rotation. So I don't count that as the game rotated and died. It was like,
it's like a correlation doesn't equal causation argument, where it's like just because the game rotated and just so happened to die does not mean that rotation is the reason the game died, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I do agree, but like I said, if you're looking at a game and you think if my cards rotate out, I'm not going to like this. If my cards get devalued, I'm not going to like this. I would very honestly suggest maybe board games, maybe miniatures, maybe other games that have more eternal formats, maybe Magic or Pokemon.
Imperium 4th edition, Gloomhaven, you get on it, boys.
Yeah. There are games that have such a large large range of opportunity because they have multiple formats that Magic's probably a great example of, your cards could actually go up in value because after rotation, there's so many other eternal formats that the moment another combo piece comes out, the card you bought now could double in value. We've seen that happen before. If you're not playing Magic, it's probably you're probably not going to see that happen. Pokemon, it could happen with GLC, possibly, but probably not. You're more than likely going to see your cards go up in value due to scarcity or collectability. But like if you're looking at One Piece hasn't been around long enough, One Piece isn't big enough, and One Piece doesn't have an established 20 plus year, eternal format to pull from. So right now for you specifically, Greg, you're about to go through some of the birthing pains of set rotation. However, if the game survives long enough, which I think it will, and Bandai is willing to support those eternal formats, I don't think it's going to be as bad as everyone thinks it will be, because it already sounds like they're willing to continue allowing people to play with the cards they love, even if it's not in standard format, which is a good sign.
Right. Yeah, honestly, and here's where I kind of reveal my hand, I guess, if you were... During this podcast recording, I've kind of been multitasking a little bit. I've been unsleeving my One Piece collection because I think for the time being, again, just for the sake of, selling while things are still moving and things like that, I'm moving away from the One Piece collection, but you best believe if the rotation goes smoothly and that set 5 onwards format is good, then, I'll dip my toes in the water one more time and, rebuy a deck and things like that. But quite honestly, it's kind of funny considering I just talked about One Piece the entire time. But One Piece is actually one of the games I'm looking to move away from to help fund Flesh and Blood and also the upcoming Gundam card game. So I'm interested in looking at how the format goes from afar. Personally, I don't feel like comfortable continuing to keep my collection, especially considering the news, just from a value-based standpoint or whatever you want to look at it. But
so weird speculation before we quit. And I know it's late and you need to go to bed and I'm getting pretty tired. So we'll make this real fast, which means like 20 minutes.
Right. That's always how it is with us, Siggy.
Yeah, but that's what I enjoy so much about this. I had an interesting thought because Bandai is a business and businesses need to make money. So we'll preface with that. Do you think, pure speculation, that they timed the announcement of the One Piece trading card game rotation so people like yourself could sell out while the cards are worth something to then rebuy into Gundam?
Maybe. I don't know. I think the biggest thing is that, they announced rotation really early. Thankfully, they announced it a whole year before it's actually going to be implemented, right? And so to me, that's kind of the sign where it's like, hey, we made this announcement, you didn't know about it. However, the market, is not going to adjust just yet. I think what they wanted to happen was, the market's not going to adjust that much because these cards are still legal for another year. So you'll be fine. These cards will be awesome. You'll still want these cards, right? If you're a player. But they also want to give players ample time to say, hey, if you want to move over to our other new shiny, card game that's over here releasing in the summer, you're more than welcome. And so, while I don't think that was like a maybe, Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, right? But it may not have been like a completely intentional move, or it may have been. But if it wasn't intentional, it sure ends up being a real happy accident. That this announcement was made kind of during the same time, and I kind of, because there's so much inter game stuff going on with Bandai, especially with the player base, it would not surprise me whatsoever if that's what they're going for. And once One Piece is the grass is greener on the other side, then people can maybe sell some of their high end Gundam cards to buy One Piece again. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
I don't know if it's true or not, but you're like the 5th person I've talked to in the last week who has said, I'm selling my One Piece and I'm buying all in on Gundam. So it's like, is this convenient? Because these aren't people none of these people I've talked to know each other. So it's just kind of like, I keep hearing the same thing from the same people. It seems like
the thing to do right now. You know what I mean? It's the shiny new card game. I absolutely love Gundam. I think Gundam has a lot more cultural or influential relevance than One Piece as an anime does. I just think One Piece or Gundam is just so important to the overall anime industry.
I won't lie. I like One Piece a lot. I like Gundam way more. So if you had to make me pick, like, would you like to play the Gundam game, the Gundam trading card game, or the One Piece trading card game? See ya, Luffy. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big One Piece fan, but I'm a much larger Gundam fan. I have an inordinate amount of Gunpla, like a lot, and getting trading card games for my favorite Gundams is like chef's kiss. And then the new foiling and alternate arts, like yeah. Also, I have a bunch of friends who went to Orlando to the, I don't know what to call it, like the beta
Bandai Card Games Fest,
whatever it was, where they basically showed up like your first opportunity to play Gundam.
Yeah,
and everyone loved it. Did you get to go to that?
I did get to go to it. The tickets were very limited for Gundam. I got to play in Union Arena on I think it was Saturday. Yeah, I got to play the Saturday Gundam. Union Arena event. No Gundam, but thankfully, I got into 2 beta events through my local game store, so I was able to play. And at one of them, I even managed to score first place, so I got $100 in store credit, and I felt really good about myself that night. So
well done. Yeah, everyone I've talked to says the Gundam game is like the best stuff from all of the Bandai systems. The artwork looks good. I mean, there's a bunch of cards I just want to collect because they're pictures of my favorite Gundams. And I'm also really into mecha. So
Monday, please don't rotate my Strike Freedom Gundam. When you release that will be my deck until the end of time. Don't take it away from me.
They will. Anyway. They will.
Yeah, they will. They're gonna.
What did I say about setting expectations, my friend?
Anyways, thanks for watching today's episode of the Kado Games Podcast. If you would like to subscribe, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have any comments, please comment on the YouTube channel. That's all for today's podcast recording of the Kado Games Podcast. I've been Greg from Debatably Playable, and I'm here with the host of today's episode, Sugiyama from Kado Games. Thanks for watching.
All right, so before we actually get on out of here, Greg, why don't you tell people where they can find you and all of your really fun commentary and content.
Thank you. My channel is still a work in progress. You've heard that last time I've been on the show. I've been trying to figure out this balance between if I want to make trading card game content, I need to take time away from playing trading card games. So finding that balance is really tricky. But you can find me on Debatably Playable on X, also, website formerly known as twitter.com. And, maybe I'll finally get around to making that YouTube channel and having that template there for so you can put it in the show notes as well. So
do it.
Thanks so much for having me on again. It's it's an honor to be a return guest on the Kado Games Podcast. And great discussion today.
Yeah, we will have you on again. We'll definitely have you on when Gundam comes out because I'm saving my money and I'm really hoping to pull some of those like rainbow foils. Ooh, oh mama, so excited. Anyways, My name's Sugi. You've been listening to the Kado Games podcast. You can check us out all over the internet. You've got all the show notes at the bottom. Just make sure to like, subscribe, follow, do all that good stuff. But thank you, Greg, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you next time. And remember, as always, here at Kado Games,
sell One Piece, buy Gundam. Oh wait,
yeah, you're not wrong. Remember to play games and have fun.
Sell One Piece, buy Gundam.
Yeah, sell One Piece. Get out from under it.